afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul. I am a nerd, and you are here at the April 2014 Tabs 3 Virtual User Group meeting, where it is just a little bit gloomy outside. I don't know where you guys are. I don't know whether it's gloomy there, but it is gloomy here. So I guess it's spring. The grass is green, but I guess we're getting the April showers that will eventually bring the May flowers. So we're going to liven things up and start talking about tabs and all the wonderful topics that we have for today. There we go. I'm clicking around trying to get this screen to come up. Today we are talking about the customization options. Mary Jo's going to tell you about those. These are something that we set up if we set up your software, or you set up when you first set up your software, and then you kind of forget about. So we want to kind of go in and take a look at them, because it's probably a fair statement that the last time you looked at them you didn't know what they meant. And so we're going to go in and take a look at them, because there may be something in there that interests you. You may go, oh gosh, I could go here and change this, or I could tweak this a little bit and have it make this effect. Mary Jo's given me the speed up thing. So I'm going to move on to my topic, which is payment integration, and payment integration between tabs and the general ledger. We're kind of having a three-fer of integration. This month we're talking about payment integration. Next month we're talking about AP and GL integration into tabs. And the month after we're talking about trust accounting integration. I want to get all those three things out there before Mary Jo says I need to speed up and move more quickly. This is our housekeeping section where we talk about how to control the meeting that you are currently in. And this right here is your GoToWebinar control panel. Many of you have been here before, so you know what this is, but for those of you who are new, you can get rid of this by clicking this little button that is in this little button bar that juts off to the left of it that looks like an arrow pointing to the right. This will cause this to collapse and get out of your way, and you may want to do that because it may be covering up my screen, and you want to see absolutely everything that I have on my screen. When you do that, this button will turn into a button that looks like arrows pointing to the left, because clicking it again will cause this to come back out into focus. Why would you want to do that? Because you're shy and you have a question. You can type your question here where it says enter a question for staff. Do not forget to hit the send button. Leanne, our humble yet diligent moderator, will notice that you have a question. She will interrupt Mary Jo or myself at the appropriate time, and she will ask your question on your behalf. If you have follow-up questions, or if we're not answering the right question, you just keep typing questions here, and don't forget to keep hitting send, and Leanne will keep continuing to ask your question on your behalf. If you are not shy and you have a question, click this button. The little hand with the arrow pointing upward in front of it means raise your hand. And Leanne will do the same thing. She'll notice that you have a question. She'll wait for the opportune time. She'll interrupt us. But then, instead of asking your question on your behalf, she will unmute you and let you ask your own darn question. So, there we have it. Enough of that. I'm going to press this magic button, and I'm going to press this magic button, and I'm going to take Mary Jo into here, and she's going to tell you all about the customization options.
Okay. So as Paul said, sometimes we set up these customization settings when you first purchase the software, and we want to...
Go faster, Mary Jo.
I'm sorry, but he tells you my whole thing before I even get on here, so I'm telling him to stop, just go, go, go. Anyway, so you set these settings up at the beginning when you first install the software, and then a lot of people don't go back in there. And, you know, maybe in a year you start doing something a little differently, or you want to change something, and you don't know exactly where this is. So we're just going to review what's in there and then when and why you might want to change some things. So underneath our setup, we have our little customization. It's also under utilities and maintenance. Same customization, just gives it to you in two places. And so we're going to go in. And the first main screen here will tell you what type of numbering that you're doing. Most of the time, most of our clients are doing numeric, where you have the client number is a number and the dot decimal matter is a number. Tabs does allow you to have two other versions, alpha and alphanumeric. So some of you that might have converted from another program might have had a combination of letters, so that might have been set up there. It's not something we really typically change once it's set up. You decide that when you come in. The benefits of having numeric is that when you click the little new button when you're adding a client, it can automatically know what that next client ID is. If you do alpha or numeric, it does not. You have to kind of manually tell it what that is. So that makes it a little inconvenient if you don't have the numeric. Other firms just really like to have the alphanumeric. So you might see something different here. Don't be alarmed. That's just the way you were set up there, and that is something typically you save. The decimal places here, normally that's, again, something that at the beginning you might have said, well, I will never have more than 99 matters for a certain client, and so you go to 2 decimal places. But maybe as your firm grows, you realize that now you need to have a matter 100 and you need to raise that. Now, it's not something you're going to raise here. There is a place that you would change that on another screen, but this is where you can find out, what that setting is, or if you just look at a client, you're going to see what that setting is. But that's where initially, when you first set up the software, that is just selected there. Your first month of reporting year, usually that's January. We do have a couple of firms that they begin their fiscal year in December or February. There's some different ones that have different start dates, but this again is when you initially set up. And if that changes, that is possible to change it, but it is a little bit of a tricky process because you have to do it at a certain time. The other 2 things here, these used to, in prior versions, have more options here that you could change for your labeling. Right now, the client label, if you want it to say client, which is the default, it could be that, or maybe which I don't know why anybody would really change the client, but maybe you would have it say customer or something like that, that all the labels that say client right now could say something different. Timekeeper is one that I do see some people change to different names or different things. So those are the 2 that are left in version 17. In prior versions, if you see more options here, we were able to change a few other labels, but now we don't. It's pretty consistent throughout the program. The verification list, a lot of times every time you create a fee, a cost, put in a payment, there will be that little box that pops up that is the verification list. Now, some of you might not have that because you didn't check the box when you set up to create a list for fees or payments or costs or client funds. And if you want that verification, maybe some of you are seeing it for fees but not for costs, or maybe you're seeing it for payments but not for fees and costs, and you would like that verification list. This is where you can check that box for whichever corresponding list that you would like to see. Or you may want to turn it off. You say, I never use this verification list, I don't want it anymore. You can come in here and you can uncheck it. But keep in mind, when you uncheck it, or check these boxes, it does it for everyone. It's not user specific, so be careful with that. And the other thing here, sometimes you'll get a message when you go to delete the verification list that it won't allow you to delete it until you've printed it, and that can be very frustrating. So here is a box that maybe that's just not checked in your customization that allows you to delete the verification list without printing it. Now, some firms have that in place as a safeguard. They want all the verification lists printed, maybe on a weekly basis or a monthly basis before you delete it, and so they leave this unchecked. But if you don't and you're just leaving it up to your users, you can just go ahead and allow that verification deletion without printing. Saves a little bit of paper, so that's just where that is located. The email statement methods here, we have 2, the Outlook or the SMTP. This is something your IT person is probably going to know which way you're using. If you have an SMTP server, they will have that information, and you can use that, or you can use Outlook. The other systems, this is where you're going to integrate with your other program modules that you have from Tabs 3. So if you have General Ledger and you're going to integrate with General Ledger, this is where you turn it on. Trust accounting, same thing. This is where you turn it on. And again, you can print the trust account balance only statements when there's no activity, or you can include clients with only a trust balance on WIP reports. So these 2 settings for trust are found here in Tabs. And because these are printing on statements, that's why these are here. So you may or may not have these checked and may want to include trust balances with no activity on the bottom of a statement. Maybe you don't. So these are 2 places that you can uncheck or check. We do have other practice management integration. I don't know if I have anybody that does that because most of the time they're just integrating with Practice Master. And then we also have the QuickBooks. And again, we don't have very many people that are using the QuickBooks integration, but we have a few. So when this says a practice management system up here, that is not Practice Master, so just make sure that you're aware of that. If you have Practice Master, it automatically is integrated when you sync it together. So you don't need to check that box for Practice Master. On the Options tab, here's your aging periods. So maybe you started off having these aging periods and later on you want to switch this to be something different. You can do that. You also can take off and change the number of aging periods you have. You can have up to 5. If I change this to 6, I don't know that it will let me, yeah, it goes up to 5. But I could do 4, and it would take off one of the periods and I could redo, you know, what I wanted these aging periods to be. So this is something that can be changed. The statement numbering, we have 2 different ways to do that, firm level and client level. And the firm level is going to be, everybody has a statement that's unique. It doesn't matter who the client is. You start with statement number 1, and it just keeps going and accumulating until, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, regardless of the client. Client level will give you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the client. So every client will have its own 1, 2, 3 numbering system. You also have timer options in here within tabs. Practice Master has a very good timer, but we do have a couple of clients that do use the timer feature in tabs. This is where you can set your minimums and your increments. Most of the time it's a tenth, but if you change that and you bill quarter hours or whatever that is, this is where you can change those timer options. For client funds, when you're doing automatic payment codes, this is where you can set that up. For if you're doing an individual fee, advance, or expense code, or if you're just doing a regular payment code, you can set that here so that when that integrates with GL and you're using those automatic codes, you can set that up and tell it which codes to use. This is also where you can include, just like on the trust that we talked about over here, whether you want zero balance or include the fund balance on the WIP report. And you can also do billing increments as well. The rate tab is one that you may or may not come into. Most of our clients do not charge sales tax. We do have a couple. So most of the time this isn't even set. But if you did, this is where the sales tax is set. So if that rate goes up or down, this is where you can change it. And finance charge. If you adjust what your finance charges are, whether you're raising the rates or lowering them or wanting to set up a different type of a rate, this is where you would do it in customization. You can say whether or not you're going to assess it, the minimum amount, whether or not it's subject to a finance charge, if you're going to bill a minimum amount, and then you can set your rates up to 5 different rates for your finance charge. The client defaults is a big one that I don't know if people realize. When you first set up the program, we kind of talk about this, but as time goes on, you may have some things that change. Maybe you want to have every new client that you set up have trust integration turned on, or the cover statement on, or you want them to be released to bill, or any of these different features here. Maybe you want to change, you're going to email all of your statements now, and you want the default every time a new client is set up to be email. You can default it to be combining on the matters. If you do sales tax, you can default it. If you want to default that it's going to be assessing a finance charge in how many days, whether you want it applied first or last, all of those things. This probably is the main screen that I would see people coming in and making changes to. A lot of times you don't realize that you didn't have a cover statement on, and now you turn it on and you want to start using it, and you want it to just be there. And instead of having to check that every single time you open a new matter, you can come in and you can actually have these be the default. Or take it off. I mean, maybe there's something you no longer want to use trust integration or whatever it is, you can come in and turn that off as a default. So if something's happening that you don't expect it to when you set up a client, this is a good place to check and see if you can make that change. And lastly, in customization, if you start to use the merchant services that Tabs3 has partnered with, this is where you would set that up. Again, that's if you add that on, or if it's something you did purchase when you bought the software, that's fine. But this is where the credit card processing is set up for Tabs. So that is customization in a nutshell. Do we have any questions, Leanne?
No, Mary Jo, there's no questions.
I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Hold on, everybody.
Stop the presses.
Well, I was going to say I have a last-minute question coming in, but I'm not seeing the question. So, Charlotte, if you intended to send a question, can you resend it, please, and we'll get back with you.
Maybe Charlotte was sending a lawyer joke.
Maybe she was telling Paul to hurry up. No.
Maybe she was telling me to hurry up.
All right, Paul, it's yours.
Well, I'm going to say one more thing. These client defaults, these are client defaults. So let's say you do a lot of insurance defense and you have one client with hundreds or thousands of matters. This will not affect new matters for an existing client, only new clients. So it's important to remember that when you add a new matter for an existing client, it will default to what you had for the most recently added or opened active matter. We have a lot of clients that do insurance defense, and they come in here and they expect these to affect every new matter, and they won't. They'll affect every new client, but not every new matter. So just my 2 cents worth, or maybe it's only 1 cent worth. We'll see. We'll let everybody vote. Charlotte, if you'd vote on that, we'll take your opinion as to whether that was 1 cent or 2 cents worth. I am going to talk about, what am I going to talk about? Payment integration. Why am I going to Practice Master? Who knows? I am going to go over here. One of the things that I'm big on is integration. STI has Tabs, and for those of you who know it as Tabs, STI is software technology. But STI as a company has Tabs. They have an AP and general ledger software package. They have trust accounting. They have Practice Master. They all integrate together. So one of the things we're going to do over the next 3 Tabs3 virtual user group meetings is look at all the different levels of integration and actually get a little deeper than just talking about what they do and actually show how they're set up. So I'm going to talk about payment integration. Now, payment integration means that when you go to make a payment, you naturally, if you have our general ledger, you want the payment information to go over to general ledger so that it will reflect as income in your books, and so that that payment will be over there for you to incorporate into a deposit slip that you're going to put into the bank. The way to get that over there, and you can see this happening. If I were to make a payment, let's find somebody that owes money. We'll hope he owes money. Yep, he does. If we make a payment for $100, here is where that payment is going to integrate. You can actually see it once you save the payment. You can go back in and see how it integrated. But if you don't do that, you don't really care and you don't really see it. It all happens in the background. But why and how? Very simple. If we go over here to integration and click on GL Integration Setup, and specifically on Configure Payment Integration, this is where we set up what parts of a payment are going to go to what accounts in General Ledger. Now, Tabs knows when you receive a payment for $1,100, Tabs knows that the bill that's being paid is one that reflected $100 in advances and $1,000 in fees, and it even knows that of that $1,000 in fees, 2 hours were for John at $2.50 an hour and 2 hours were for Bob at $2.50 an hour, and it could even pass it through at that level. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me show you. If we sneak over to GL and look at the income statement for this particular sample firm, we'll see that in this example, we are showing fee income broken down by the timekeeper that brought the money into the firm. So that's an example of payment integration that's been set up on a level where it not only passes the fees over to a single fee account, like a lot of firms do, but it actually breaks it down and says, well, of this payment, which includes $1,000 for fees, 500 of it should go to Bob and 500 of it should go to Pam, or whatever the case may be. So if we sneak back then over to Tabs and look at this, this is where we're setting that up. If we go into fees, we've told it to break it down by working timekeeper, and then when we do that fee account button, it lets us determine that for each of these 5 working timekeepers, we're going to have it go to these accounts. Now, a debit to the cash account is what puts the money into the cash account. So your debit side is always going to be what operating account you're going to deposit this payment into. But your credit side is always going to be how you want it to be reflected on the income statement. Now, if we weren't doing this, we would simply say that all fees should go into the fee income account instead of Bob's fees go to Bob and Michael's fees go to Michael and Paula's fees go to Paula. But if you want to break it down on this level, when you decide how you want to break it down, maybe by primary timekeeper, maybe by working timekeeper, maybe by client location, maybe you have 3 offices and you've got your cases all broken down by which office is handling them, and then you want the payments to be reflected on the income statement by which office brought that payment in. Maybe it's by category of law. Maybe you want to show real estate, how much money we brought in for real estate work, how much money we brought in for criminal work, how much money we brought in for insurance defense. These are all different ways that you can break it down. We've said working timekeeper, and so therefore it goes and says, well, when money comes in for Michael Jensen, it should go to this account. And if we were to click on this, we'd see that this is fee income MLJ, Michael Jensen. Now you'll notice that there's 2 levels here. And what that means is we could say, we want to get really granular in how we're representing this. We want to show fee income by who did the work and what type of work they were doing. So we could conceivably say we want on the first level to break it down by working timekeeper, and on the second level to break it down by client category. And we'd be able to see Michael Jensen criminal work, $1,000. Michael Jensen insurance defense, $5,000. So your income statement could actually break it down to 2 levels, not just 1. Now similarly, we can break down costs. In this example, we're breaking it down by type, but we're really only breaking it down by expenses and advances, okay? But we could also break it down by cost type on a level where it's photocopy versus courier expenses versus client costs advanced. A lot of different ways to break it down. You could even break it down by which timekeeper was responsible for the client for whom the cost was advanced or expensed. So again, a lot of different ways to break that down. And then we have finance charge, progress fees, and then the 3 types of sales tax, fees, advances, and expenses.
And Paul, I'm just going to add back on your costs. Sometimes you want that to be into different bank accounts too. You were talking about the other side, but you also could choose different bank accounts. So if your cost advance goes into a certain bank account and your other expenses go into a different bank account, your general fund perhaps, you can choose different bank accounts as well.
Very good point. Yeah, so you are breaking down both sides of the transaction when you're defining this. And then finally, the last part of this puzzle is, what about the payments that aren't unapplied, unallocated? What that means is, if Mr. Smith is in the conference room and he's here to sign his will, and he goes ahead and signs the documents, and then he turns to the attorney and says, how much do I owe you? He pulls out his checkbook. And the attorney's like, well, I don't know, we haven't printed the bill yet. So he goes into Marlene, and Marlene says, he owes us $1,000. It's a big will. And so he writes a check for $1,000, and the attorney takes the check to Marlene, and Marlene makes the payment entry because they're going to put that money in the bank. But Marlene has not printed that bill yet. That's called unapplied, meaning Tabs really hasn't billed him the $1,000 yet, and yet you've put in a payment. And so that payment can't really be applied to anything because there's nothing out there to apply it to yet. This is where you define the temporary holding account, where that's going to go until that final bill gets printed and updated so that it can be applied. Now, it's very important to understand that you really shouldn't have unapplieds unless you know why you're having unapplieds, like the example I just gave where the guy paid his $1,000, but we're not going to print the bill till tomorrow. You shouldn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in unapplied because you're not doing something right. But this is the account that's set up to hold that in those instances where you do have unapplieds and they need to kind of be held somewhere until Tabs can further break them down and further figure out how to apply them in General Ledger. So that is how payments integrate with General Ledger. It is set up through Tabs. It is on the integration tab right here, and then the GL integration setup, and it's specifically this configure payment integration button right here. Any questions?
No questions, Paul.
Boy, we must really be doing good, or everybody's looking out the window going, gosh, it's raining outside. Well, next month we're going to talk about device interfaces. You all have copying machines and telephone systems and postage meters, and some of them are capable of collecting information about who to bill for those costs. And STI has something called the TB device program that can be hooked into that device interface and pull that information straight into Tabs. So we're going to talk about those and how they work. We're also going to talk about accounts payable integration. Remember, I told you that we're going to have a trifecta, if you will, of integration sessions. So next month we're going to talk about integrating accounts payable with Tabs so that those checks that you write for the clerk of courts and other client-related advances can be reflected at the time that the check's written on the client's bill as well. And in case you're curious, in about 34 minutes we're going to have our Practice Master Virtual User Group meeting, and this month in April we're talking about reports, the reports that come with Practice Master that a lot of people don't even know are there, and turning filters into quick views. And next month at our Practice Master Virtual User Group meeting we're going to talk about quick reports, a very quick way to get information and get it into a form that you can print out, and integration with Office 365. Now, if any of those topics are of interest to you and you're thinking, gosh, I'm not going to be here, I'm going to a meeting and I'm not going to be here in 33 minutes it is now for the Practice Master Virtual User Group meeting, you can always go to our website, attorneycomputersystems.com, click on any of the virtual user group meetings. We have to wait for it because with this Heartbleed thing, it now takes an extra 7 seconds to make a secure connection. You can click on any of the virtual user groups that are listed over here. By the way, that wasn't true, so you techie people out there, I was just making that up. Tabs 3, Practice Master. Also, we have a World Docs virtual user group meeting. And you'll always be able to see, once they're posted, and that's usually anywhere from a couple days to a week after they were recorded, the recorded versions of all the sessions we've done. So we have the March virtual user group meeting, the February, and of course we have a registration link for the one that's coming up at 2 o'clock. So, everybody have a good afternoon, good rest of the day, good rest of the week, and a good rest of the month. What, we got 4 more days, and then we'll see the Mayflowers, and we will see you at the end of May when we have our next Tabs3 virtual user group meeting. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.